Finnish politician Paivi Rasanen went on trial in August after hate speech after publicly expressing Christian beliefs. Paivi was charged with agitation against a minority group back in 2021 for sharing her beliefs on marriage and sexual ethics in a tweet 2 years earlier, as well as a live radio debate and 2004 church pamphlet. So the verdict is now in. I'm joined by Lorcan Price, legal counsel for ADF UK, and hopefully Paivi will be joining us down the line in a moment. But in the meantime, welcome to the show, Lorcan.
Thank you, Andrew.
So could you explain to us, for those of us who have no idea about what's going on here, what is the background to this case?
Well, as you say, in 2019, Paivi tweeted criticism of the decision of her church, which is the Finnish Lutheran Church, to sponsor the Helsinki Pride Parade. And she said that essentially, why would they use church funds to do that? And she included in her tweet a picture of scripture. And as a result of this, somebody made a criminal complaint to the police. They then opened an investigation into her. They went into things she had written in 2004, so nearly 15 years prior to that, where she talked about the purpose of marriage in a Christian context between a man and a woman that would not include gay marriage. Again, that was in the context of a debate that was going on in the Finnish Lutheran Church at the time. And because of those two things, they brought criminal charges against her.
Just clarify for everyone, because the accusation was one of hate speech.
That's right.
What was the Bible quotation that she included, and why was it so hateful?
Well, it was from Romans, and the Bible quotation uses strong language about man shall not lay down with man.
I'm familiar with the verse, yeah.
So the problem with that is that somebody took offence to it.
Yes.
But it's in every Bible in Finland and around the world.
Well, in the world, I would say,
exactly
yeah.
that. And you can find Bibles in libraries and churches and so on. But it was the fact that she tweeted it with a criticism of her church's decision to sponsor the Pride Parade.
And then the pamphlet, that was to do with the debate over gay marriage.
Yes.
Now, no, not that this should be relevant because I believe in free speech no matter what you say. But was she saying her view was that gay marriage is not compatible with Christian thought? Or was she saying that gays are evil and should be, thrown into a volcano or something?
Absolutely not. No, she was saying it's not compatible with homosexual behaviour as such or within marriage.
Right.
And so her distinction was that Christians believe this is a sin, but that you should love the sinner, which is what Jesus Christ said when he was here preaching. And it was exactly what she said Christians believe. And she goes out of her way in the pamphlet on a number of occasions, and in fact the prosecution was forced to admit this in court, to say that every person has dignity, equal dignity, they should be respected, discrimination, unlawful discrimination is wrong.
Yes.
But Christians believe this, and they believe it for these reasons.
So this does sound like pretty standard Christian beliefs. It doesn't sound like it's been framed in a particularly hateful way. Why would that be subject to a criminal prosecution? I think a lot of people watching be very confused by that, because you can't prosecute. Would we prosecute every Waterstones because they've got copies of the Bible on sale? What's going on here? Well,
this is precisely what confused us, and it's only when you look at who made the prosecution decision, who was then the chief prosecutor, a lady called Raija Torvajanen. She said quite publicly that as far as she was concerned, Finland was suffering from an epidemic of hate speech, and that while you were entitled to believe what it says, and this is a quote, in the Bible, the Quran or Mein Kampf, you weren't necessarily entitled to say that out in a hateful way.
So she actually put those three texts together,
yes,
as though they're comparable?
Correct.
I mean, isn't that hate speech?
Well, it shows a deep ideological position on the part of the prosecution services. And that should concern all of us, irrespective of what European country we're in or what country we're in.
Yes.
Because if you have vague laws plus an ideologically motivated prosecution service or any institution, then you come with these type of outcomes.
So she wasn't promoting the idea that they should change the law to make homosexuality illegal?
Certainly not.
Or anything like that?
So, no, nothing like that.
So this is so confusing. So it goes to court anyway, she's prosecuted. What's the verdict?
Well, we had it in the Helsinki Criminal Court 2 years ago now, and it was unanimous acquittal. The prosecution then have the power, strangely under Finnish law, to appeal a not guilty verdict. So they appealed it to the Court of Appeal. And then just there this month, we had another unanimous not guilty verdict. So she's been put through 2 rounds of court proceedings, years of this case dragging on, over 15 hours, in fact, of police interrogation.
Yes.
And all to arrive at the conclusion that was obvious to anybody paying attention that she wasn't engaged in hate speech.
So is this the end of it? Because you say that now the appeal has been found that, again, not guilty, unanimous. Can they try again?
They can, actually.
Really?
They can take it to the Supreme Court.
Can they just do this endlessly?
Well, and that's a very interesting question. I mean, these guys will reach the end of this process with an appeal to the Supreme Court, and if we're acquitted there, that will be the end of it. If we're found guilty there, we can then bring it ourselves to the European Court of Human Rights. So we'll have to wait and see. So but the process itself is a punishment.
Yes, of course.
You're sending a message, and this is quite deliberately, I think, what the Prosecutor General was doing here, to everyone in Finnish society. Paivi is a well-known public figure. She's a politician. If we can drag her through the courts this much, we can do it to you as well, so you better stay quiet.
Yeah, now, I was in Finland quite recently giving a talk, and I didn't realise the extent that these kind of critical social justice, woke ideology has taken hold in Finland. And a lot of people that are very, very liberals are very worried. They're saying this is a disaster for our country, this authoritarian movement that's sweeping through. Have these hate speech laws always been on the statute books, or is this a relatively new development, or are they just being applied with greater force given the ideological bent of those in charge?
Well, they came in 2005, and interestingly, Paivi was actually a politician who voted for them when she was in Parliament.
Is that right?
She'd never believed they'd be used in this kind of way. So it goes to show you kind of unintended consequences. But they were introduced in 2010, and since then, we've seen a new prosecutor come in, who has since left, actually, and she has used them in this kind of weaponised way I described. The reason they're there is this is Finland taking its obligations from international law on hate speech into domestic law.
Right.
So, and the UK has the same obligations in international law, and we have very concerning laws in this country, as you know well.
We do, and they're getting worse with Scotland introducing their hate speech laws. The Irish hate speech bill is an absolute disaster for free speech, but that's a good example. So with Ireland, a lot of critics are saying, well, this will be weaponised by activists to effectively criminalise anyone who misgenders someone, who likes to use pronouns according to biological sex, not some sense of a gendered soul. Now, that's a real problem, but the Irish government is saying, no, that would never happen, don't worry, just put it on the statute books, it'll never happen. But this case of Paivi, she thought it wouldn't happen, she voted for it, and it did happen. Doesn't this show the danger of putting such vague, nebulous terms like hate onto the statute books without any definition at all?
Absolutely. Unless you've already guessed, I'm an Irishman. I've been in Dublin speaking to members of the Parliament about that piece of legislation. It's deeply concerning. The then Minister for Justice in Ireland said that the reason they had left a kind of an open-ended category around gender was to, quote-unquote, future-proof the law so that new gender identities that are discovered in the future would also be protected by the hate speech law.
It's astonishing. But didn't they also say, when asked to define hatred, well, it means hatred? It was a circular definition.
Correct, yeah.
Right. Well, this is absolutely absurd.
It means that you're left in a position where you never know whether or what you're saying in a group to your friends, in a public setting, wherever, whether or not it actually crosses the threshold into hate. So the prudent decision would be then say nothing.
Exactly.
Don't get into controversy.
And of course you don't know what the views of a future government might be, how they might choose to interpret hate. They could interpret criticism of the government as hate. What do you do then? I mean, this seems to be an obvious problem to me, but it's not one that people are... I mean, a lot of the people who are would be supportive of what the government did to Paivi aren't really thinking in terms of how the legislation might be used against them one day.
Exactly. I mean, you can totally disagree with what Paivi said, but if you have to take the risk then that a future government may not take a very different view about your own position and then decide to prosecute you. Giving institutional power to ideological prosecutors with vague open-ended laws is a recipe for disaster for everybody, irrespective of where they stand on different issues.
Lorcan Price, thanks so much for joining me.